For context about the Yemen crisis, I spoke to Ivan Eland. He's a senior fellow at the Independent Institute. He detailed what he expects out of the meetings after both sides refused to meet each other.
Well, I don't think we can expect too much, but of course negotiations have to start somewhere. So I think, that's what they're trying to do. The problem is they're not the only parties in the conflict. Of course, we have al-qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula out there gaining ground from the fact that there's a civil war going on. So I think, there are other parties out there as well. And of course, there's outside parties. There's Saudi Arabia and there's the United States who are doing airstrikes and drone attacks and that sort of thing.
Well, that being said, we have the side story, the White House confirming the death of the second in command of AQAP by a drone strike. How does that impact everything else that's happening at the moment, what's happening on the ground and what's happening in Geneva?
Well, I think you can't kill your way out of these insurgencies or with a counterterrorism campaign, because what happens is war is a hothouse of evolution, and you get more when one guy gets killed. These guys will be more ruthless and bad, more radical, simply because they survived, right? And they're the life of hard knocks, so to speak. And so I think it's a significant accomplishment, but we can't overstate it. And I think that in a lot of the cases, we've increased AQAP, and that's been documented by journalists, Western journalists, and local journalists in Yemen by all the U.S. airstrikes and drone strikes that have gone on for years. So I think, these types of things, and we see the war, al-Qaeda is taking advantage of that, so they're gaining ground on the ground. There's sort of a hybrid. We have ISIS, which in Iraq and Syria, which holds ground, and you have the main al-Qaeda group, which is just terrorism, and AQAP is sort of a hybrid. They hold ground, but they also launch attacks against the West.
There was this hope of having some sort of ceasefire in place or something agreed to before Ramadan begins later this week. Do you think a ceasefire is even likely at this point?
I don't know. I sort of doubt it, but you hope so, because they can get humanitarian stuff in there. But of course, when you bring humanitarian aid, it's not neutral either, because it helps one side or the other, and that's why they're reluctant to do so, unfortunately. But because providing humanitarian food, medicine, etc., to one's population hurts the other side, and vice versa. And so that's why you have seemingly callous behavior. But I hope something can be worked out.
That being said, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, said that Yemen's very existence hangs in the balance. The health minister there called it the biggest disaster in its modern history. I mean, if you look at the real people on the ground, not the ones that are fighting, there were some serious problems going on.
Well, there are, and war has all sorts of problems. Of course, people get killed, but there's also disease spreads, the water's contaminated, etc. So one problem multiplies on the other side, and a lot of times there are more people killed by other things, derivatives of the war, rather than shells or bullets or whatever. And so you do have a humanitarian crisis, I agree. And also, Yemen has had civil wars before, but I think this is pretty intense with the Saudi bombing and the Houthis and of course, al-Qaeda in the mix as well.